Cool. Okay, there we go. All right. Okay, welcome guys. So for the homework review today, first off, do you guys see my screen? You should see like VS Code and this thing that says all games. Cool. All right, so for the review today, I wanted to focus on doing some sort of front-end data normalization and cleanup, and taking data that you might get from an API call and basically manipulating it to turn into a data set that you might want to use on the front end. So this is going to be pretty similar and in line with the kind of stuff you guys have been working on this week with James in lecture. I kind of just came up with my own random data set that is kind of just a hypothetical JSON data set that you could get from an API call. And I kind of want us to look at it, figure out what's going on with it, and then I have one sort of use case, user story, and I would like for us to try and solve it together. There's multiple ways to go about doing it. I worked out a few ways that will work for sure if we get stuck. But yeah, I kind of want us to all pitch in together and try to solve this, because that's going to be the most helpful, I think, is practicing actually kind of exercising your brain in thinking through these problems instead of just watching someone else like solve the problem for you. So yeah, so let's go ahead and take a look. So here's my code over here. It is a simple React component. I'm calling it streamers demo. This is going to be sort of like a Twitch type clone. Do any of you not know what twitch.tv is? Okay, I'm going to assume that you all know. So what I have is some data that is basically giving me an ID, which is going to be the ID number for a video game. I'm going to have a name of that video game, its genre, and then I'm going to have a streamer ID, a streamer name, and then the date that that streamer joined Twitch as one object inside of this array. So what I'm getting, if you look at this, is I'm getting an object for each streamer that is currently streaming that game. So looking at this, we can see that we have Pokemon on here 4 times, and we have 4 different streamers. So we've got tiger, dog, guinea pig, and leopard streaming, and they all have their own IDs there. We go down here, we see we have Minecraft with its own streamers, and none of the streamers are duplicated because a streamer can only stream, one game at a time. Animal Crossing, Super Smash Brothers, and then Super Mario. So what we want for our sort of user story is we want to, I'll just kind of bring up, I have one that's working, but we want something that looks kind of like this, that lists out the games that are currently being streamed, so each individual game, and we want to show the number of people streaming each game. So it'd be kind of like when you go to like the Twitch like browse page, and it shows all of the games that are currently being streamed, and then I think it has, instead of showing the number of people streaming, it has the number of viewers, but in this case, we just want to show how many people are streaming that particular game. So that's kind of our use case. So this is the data we're getting back, and we want to show it like that. So let's try to work through this. So what I have so far is I have my data here. It's kind of long, so we're just going to scroll down. This is where the main code lives right here. So I set up a little piece of state. This is going to eventually contain the normalized data. So like when we're all done with it, we want games data to equal that normalized data set. I have a use effect here that is running a normalized data function. So this normalized data function will just run automatically as soon as this component mounts. Right now it's just empty, so it's not doing anything. And then I have some render JSX where I am mapping over my games data after it's normalized. And then we're going to show, the game name, the streamers, and then the number of people streaming. So this right now just isn't doing anything because this is just an empty array. So these are just like blank strings. So it's not gonna show anything. But so that's where we're at. So what we want to do is start in here inside of our normalized data. And if we look, in fact, I'm going to pull this up here. We'll go to streamers. So we want it to look like that. So what is one of the first things that you guys might want to do, or what is one of the first pieces of information here you think that we might want to start messing around with?
Are we trying to get the user's ID or the game ID? Or what are we trying to display?
Yeah, so basically, so this is the information. The ID here is the game ID. The streamer ID is the streamer ID. So you can see how the game ID repeats, but the streamer ID does not. So looking at this, let's say that the first thing we want to do is we want to just display each individual game. So we have, a total of 5 games, even though they're all multiplying here. But let's start with the games. We just want to show, we want to be able to display to our UI each individual game that is currently being streamed.
I mean, we could just map over the games and get their ID. I mean, it'd be all of them. So it'd be like 1, 1, 1, 1, 2, 2, 2. So we could start there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good idea. Okay. So we're going to take our, so we'll call it data because that's what we're passing in. So yeah, this data is called API data. And we're passing it in there. So data, okay, so you're saying do data.map. Okay, we'll just call this D for data. Okay. So we're going to map over it, and then what do we want to do?
Grab their ID, D.ID.
Mm-hmm.
Or we got to return it.
Okay, so D.ID. Okay, and so you're saying we want to return it?
I think so.
You're saying like return it like here?
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. So yeah, so you're absolutely right. What this is going to do is it's going to return an array of each of these IDs. But how can we get access to that array?
We could do like a console.log, or we could maybe render it in the JSX.
Yeah, all right, console.log. We'll do, actually, you're saying like maybe like put it in here?
the console.log.
Uh-huh.
Or probably
Or
want
out here.
side of it. Yeah.
Okay, and then what should we put in there?
Should we maybe set that data.map
Yeah,
to a variable?
Yeah, exactly. Perfect. Yeah, because we're still running into the issue of we don't have access to that data. So the way that you gain access to anything really in programming is to set it to a variable. So yeah, let's go ahead and set it to a variable. We'll just call this unique game ID. Cool. So unique game IDs, and then yeah, let's go ahead then and console.log that out. All right, cool, sweet. So there it is showing up here. So I know for a fact that we have 21 items in our API data up here. So this is correct. And you can see we're getting all of our IDs here. So cool. All right. So now inside of our normalized data function, we have this variable, unique game IDs, that is an array of all of the IDs that all of the game IDs that are inside of our API data. So that's helpful for sure. However, we don't want like, 21, repeated game IDs. We just want like the ID for each game and that's it. So we want a total of like, 5 IDs, just the unique IDs. So what is a way that we can get just the unique values from an array? So there's a bunch of ways. I'm just going to kind of show you through like my problem solving like methodology. But let's go ahead and do, okay, get unique values in array JavaScript. Okay, I've obviously looked at this before. All right, so this guy's saying, how can I get a list of unique values in an array? That's exactly what we want. So, all right, this guy's like, so I went on about it, blah, blah, blah. This requires 2, contains, and unique. That looks weird and complicated. I don't want to do that one. Let's keep going. This guy's saying, for one-liner, a unique a.filter. Okay, so we could do some kind of a filter function. That's cool. What else do we have? Okay, cool. So this guy's saying here's a much cleaner solution for ES6. And I love ES6. ES6 is the newest stuff in JavaScript, and it's usually really good. It uses set and the spread operator. So he has this, var a equals this array, and then he is spreading out and then setting a new set. And that set is going to equal an array that just has the unique values. Okay, that seems like a pretty cool way. So let's do this. Let's spread out and then create a new set and then pass in that array that we want to pull out all the duplicates for. And just like as an example, like I'm a little bit confused personally about what exactly is happening here. Like I know what new set is. That's going to create a new set. And a set in JavaScript is really just it's a new type of array, but it can only contain unique values. And if there are any duplicate values, it'll just take them out. That's really all a set is. But a set is technically not an array. It's just like an array. And so I did a little bit of Googling and I found this cool page. So for the record, like if you ever like get something like this and you see like an answer, you're like, okay, I can do this, that's cool. But like what is going on here? So what I did is I Googled, okay, spread operator with new set. That's what this is this spread operator. And this guy here is nice, and he even told us what's going on. So I Googled it, and I was like, what is this? Like I know what the spread operator does. I know that like if you use that and then you put the name of an array there, it'll like, it's kind of like breaking each value out individually. But I found this cool page that has all these use cases for the spread with array in JavaScript. And one of them is exactly what we're looking at. It's this using the spread operator with a new set. So let's go ahead and look at that. So I think it's this right here, set to array. All right, so this is saying, let's create a new set object. Okay, so const set equals new set, pass in an array, and then you're gonna get this new set. Cool, okay. So looking at this though, we can see that this set is not an array. It's like, has these like curly braces around it with these values. So a set is not exactly an array, but we do want an array. So this is saying using spread, we can convert the set into an array. So we can do const array equals, and then that. So they're spreading out over this set here, but that converts this into an array. Okay, so spreading out over a set converts a set into an array. Cool. Okay, so that is really helpful information. And so here we're spreading out over a new set that we're creating here. So instead of having curly braces with the 1, 2 and it being a set, it's going to have brackets and it's going to be an array, but it's still going to have just the unique values. So that is really helpful information. And that's just like one example of like the power of Googling. And I do that like all day, every day. That's just kind of like the name of the game for sure. So cool. All right, so let's go ahead and do that. So we're looking at this. This is a, we're setting, you know, what we want. We want this unique game IDs variable to be that array. So what we can do is maybe instead of creating an array here and then, you know, converting that into a set down here, which we could do. We could do something like, okay, so we have unique game IDs. That's cool. Maybe we could say const unique game IDs array equals, and then this is where we want to do our set. So I'm going to follow this syntax here. We're going to create a new set. We're going to pass in our unique game IDs. And then what this should do, I think that needs to be connected there. So what this should do is this should create a set that will have just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then the spread operator is going to change that set into an array. So it'll be an array of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And that should equal to this. So if we change this to unique game IDs array and hit save, come back over here and check our thing. Go console. Oh, it's wrong one. Streamer's demo. Okay, cool. There we go. All right, so now this unique games IDs or game IDs array, this variable is giving us exactly what we want. So now we have an array that has each of the unique game IDs for all of the games in our original data set. So we're getting close. We're getting close to this, because we know that, you know, we're going to want the IDs for each of these games, but we also want, you know, the name of each of these, and maybe some of this other data, maybe the genre as well. We don't want that to be repeated. So we have this unique game IDs array. That's cool. So what can we do now to, let's go look at that array. So here's our array. What can we do now to not just return an array that just has these IDs, but maybe an array of objects that has the game ID, the game name, and the game genre for each of these games. So we know that we want to return an array. So what are some of the functions that we could maybe, that maybe you think of when you start to hear words like returning an array or doing an iteration over something and then returning a new array? What are some of those function ideas? Or what are some of those methods that come to mind? Any ideas? Nothing? Okay, so let's do, so I'm just going to give you a couple ideas. So we have like .map. Okay, you guys have used .map before. .map iterates over each item in an array and then returns a new array with, you know, whatever happens in that iteration. We have .filter that iterates over an array and it takes out certain values from our array based on a test that we kind of give it. We have dot for each, which goes through each item in an array, but it doesn't return a new array, it just goes through each item in an array. We have dot, I think select does that as well. There's like dot for each with index. I think they have that in JavaScript. There is like, there's a whole bunch of these. So looking at this, we have an array that has each ID of our games, which is great. Now we just want the names and the genre to kind of go along with this. So what we could do is, we know that we're going to want to go through and we're going to want to look at each one of these IDs. And we're going to want to basically look at those. And then we want to compare those IDs, these IDs here, to our original data up here. Then what we can do is, so let's do that part first. So let's do something like, so we have our unique games array. Actually, okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to combine these into one function, which is very, very possible. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to say const unique game IDs, and I'm going to just do this all in like one go. So I'm going to say new set data.map, do this, we have that. And then instead of returning this, We'll do that. And we actually don't need those. Okay, cool, and then we don't need that. And this will be new game IDs. Okay, so what we did, so basically I just turned both of those into, like both of those functions into one function. So I'm basically doing a new set and then I'm creating an array here. Before we had that array, you know, let x equal, and we were just like doing data.map and then like filling that all out right here, because this is going to become a new array, which is going to be set equal to x. But instead of that, I just put all of it inside of our new set. So we got that. Okay. So we have our unique game IDs there. So now what we want to do is we eventually are going to want, we have the unique game IDs, but we want more than just the IDs. We want all of the data for each game, but just the unique ones. We don't want it repeated. So let's say we're going to want something like unique games array equals that. So I'm just going to go ahead and create this variable. Right now it's empty, but we're going to be pushing some data into this. So because we're going to want to get eventually that array of just those unique games. So what we're going to do is let's take our unique game IDs, and I'm going to do a for each loop on this. Do ID. So, oops. There's our for each loop. And let's say that we want to go through this data, which is this data here, which are API data. Let's go through that data and let's basically grab and pull out each instance of that game. So one way that we could do that is we could, so we're mapping over all of our game IDs, which are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And let's say we're on the first iteration, so we're on 1. For iteration 1, we can grab this information. In fact, we can grab all of that information, or sorry, that ends here. But we can grab all of that, which is exactly what we want. So what we're going to do is we're going to say unique game IDs dot for each, and then I'm just going to say down here, I'm just going to call each of these game, because we're grabbing stuff from just one game, because we're on ID 1 and our for each. So here's ID 1 is going to equal to Pokemon. And what we want to do is we're going to say, okay, let game equal, and then here is where we're going to filter through all of our data. We're going to look at this entire data set, but we only want to get the information that has a game ID of 1. We don't want any of this stuff. We just want that first bit of information. And we're going to set that to game, because this information is all of the Pokemon information. Then we're going to do it again, because it's about for each. Remember, we're down here in our unique game IDs dot for each. When we get to number 2, we're going to grab all of the data for 2 and set that to game. So we're going to say, okay, let game equal data dot filter. And then I'm just going to call this G like that. And then this is where we set up the it's kind of like a test for the filter. So basically, when we do data.filter, you name each item of the iteration a variable name. We're going to call it G. And then you give it a test to pass. So it's kind of like an if statement. So we're going to say if g.id equals ID. Oops. Okay. So let's go through this again one more time. So we're saying let game equal data.filter. All right, so it's all this data. We're going to filter through that data. And we're going to say each piece of data up here, each of these objects is going to be equal to G. If the G.id, so this ID here, equals this ID, which is coming from our unique game IDs down here, then let that piece of data, let each one of these equal game. So that is all that's doing. So what we're going to do is we're going to have game equal, because for the first iteration, we're on the ID number 1. So game is going to equal this. Then game is going to equal that. Then game is going to equal that. Then it's going to equal that. And I guess to here, it sees that this ID is not 1. So it's going to skip that. It's going to skip all of these. So while we're still in this dot for each loop, let's just console.log this out just to make sure that it's working. So I'm going to say for each loop game, and then we're going to console log out game. All right, let's do a refresh. Okay. All right, so here we go. So we can see that we're getting a console.log for each loop games 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times, which is exactly what we would expect because we're doing a dot for each over our unique game IDs, which are these guys right here. There's 5 numbers. So it goes through number 1. It says, okay, let game equal if, so the game is going to equal whatever, whenever the g.id, the game.id equals the ID, then it's going to console log that out. So the first one is going to be all of our Pokemon games with the ID of 1. Second one's going to be Minecraft with an ID of 2. Third one's going to be Animal Crossing with an ID of 3, and so on. So now we have, like right now we are looping over and we have access to each of these pieces of data that are unique. It's a unique set for each game, which is exactly what we want at this point in time. So let's do something else. Let's see, console.log unique game IDs. Let's just keep going down. We'll leave that at the bottom there. So now what I want to do is I want to clean this data up. So let's look at this first instance of game. So game, the first time we console.log it, game equals this array of objects. Each object contains, the genre, ID, and name of the game, and then the unique streamer data, for each person that's streaming. I want to clean up this specific piece of data, this specific like game array piece of data. And all I want is an object or an array that has just the genre, the ID, and the name of the Pokemon. So just looking at this data here, so this is an array of objects. each object has, genre, ID, name, streamer, data, but we know that the genre, the ID, and the name are going to be the same for each of these. So what could we do to look at this array of objects and then return an object that has just the ID, the name, and the genre? What are your guys' ideas? Any ideas? Okay, so what if we want to do this still inside of our dot for each loop. But what if we, so I'm going to say cleaned game, because that's what we're doing. I'm cleaning up, I'm doing another sort of normalization, but I'm cleaning up this data here. Let cleaned game equal, and then let's do game dot map. So I'm going to loop over each game or each instance inside of our game. The game.map, again, I'm just going to set that to G. And in here, what if I just return something? What if I return ID, G.ID, name? So I'm returning a custom object here, a brand new object, where I'm setting the key. This is just like text, like it's just, this is the name of the key. I can name this anything, but I'm going to name it ID. But I want the value to be the G.ID. I want the name to be the G.name, and I want the genre to be G.genre. And then I don't want anything else. I don't want any of that like streamer data. I just want the game information. So let's come here and game.
It's supposed to be inside the for loop for each loop.
Oh yes, you're right. Thank you. I feel like something's wrong here. Yeah, let me move that up. Yeah, and there. Save. Okay, there we go. So let's import each, cool. And then we're going to come down here and oops, that. So after cleaned game, and then let's console.log cleaned game, cleaned game. Save. Okay. And let's see, so we're getting for each. So let's get rid of this. I'm just gonna comment that out because that's just kind of cluttering it up. Okay, so now what we have, actually no, let's leave that in there because then we can compare them. So, okay. So now what we had before is we had game right here. And game was an array of objects that contained all of the data for each game, like up here. So the first object was this one and had all of that data. The second object here in that array, in the Pokemon array, is this one has all of that. But we didn't want that data. We just want that top data. So what we did, just to review, is we came back, where am I? Okay, right here. We mapped over each of these. So 1, 2, 3, 4. We mapped over each one, and on each one, we just returned the ID, the name, and the genre. So we basically just got rid of the streamer data because we don't need that, at least for this part. So we compare that to here, pull that down. Cool. So comparing these, this first one, has the game data and the streamer data. The second one only has the game data. So that's good. So now what we can do is, if we look at this, so let's comment this out again, just so we can clean up our console logs. So now we just have our 5 cleaned game arrays. We have cleaned game array 1, which is going to be for Pokemon. We have cleaned game array 2, which is going to be for Minecraft. Cleaned game array 3, array 4, and array 5. So now we want to, and these will be identical because this is the information that's repeating up here. We got rid of the information that was not identical. That was the streamer data, which we didn't need. We just needed the data that is identical for all of these. So we have a bunch of data that's identical. What can we do to get maybe just one instance of each of these inside of our unique games array? So remember, cleaned game, this right here, that equals this. And it equals it for each one of our games. What could we do to not push in this whole thing, but just push in one row? How could we do that here? How could we just push one row from each of these into our unique games array?
Does select grab one thing?
So yeah, select does grab one thing. But let's double check. JavaScript select method. Input select. Element.select. Select all the text. And maybe select isn't part of JavaScript. Because it looks like this is just like the input select, unless it's that's gonna be jQuery. Yeah, okay. So I don't know about select. Okay, yeah. I don't think it's gonna be select. Yeah, it's a jQuery function. Okay, so it's not gonna be select. So if we look at our app here, we can see that like there's kind of a pattern here, right? And the pattern is that it's an array of identical objects. Each one of these has an array of identical objects. And we can see that some of these arrays are bigger than others, right? So this array has 4 values, not 4 values, 4 indexes. So it has 0, 1, 2, 3. This one has 8 indexes, 0 through 7. This one has 2. This one has 3. This one has 4. But the one index that we know for sure all of these are going to share is the 0 index, the first index, right? Each of these at the very least is going to have a 0 index. like we could get rid of, like I could get rid of all of this, save. Oh, I need to grab that too. We'll comment that out, save. And so now our Pokemon array only has one object instead of the 4, but it still has the zero index, the first row. So what we could do is we could come over here and we have this unique games array. That's what we're trying to push our stuff into. Inside of this for each, we could take our cleaned, actually, so we could take our cleaned game at index 0, and we could push that into our unique games array, like that. So what that is going to do is so we're going to get cleaned game, right? Which is going to be, I'm not sure what that is, which is going to be, you know, in the case of the first one, the Pokemon one, it's going to use 4 objects. We're going to take just the first row and push that into the unique games array. Then it's going to, this whole for each is going to end. We're going to go back up to here. We're going to go to the second one. It's going to do the same thing again, get our cleaned game. Then its last argument is going to take row 0. It's going to push that into our unique games array. It's going to end, start over. It's going to go to number 3, create our cleaned games for the third time, which is going to be for Animal Crossing. Then we're going to take the first row at index 0, push that into our unique games array. So now if we console.log out, let's do unique games array. Unique games array. Now we should see our unique games array right here, and it should have a row for basically each of our unique games. Oh, sorry, I clicked the wrong one. I clicked the game ID. Boom. Okay, cool. So now we have this unique games array that has all of the game's data, but it's not repeated. It's all unique. So what we could do is we could, at this point, because this is exactly how we want our data to look, in order to show just each unique game, we could set, what do I name it as? We could set our games data to our unique games array. Then we can map over it down here. And something's freaking out. I think it tried to save while I was typing. Let's do a refresh. Because let's get rid of that, because we don't have that yet. So save. Cool. So now we can map over our state and we get all of that. So that is basically what we did to like take this data set here and like slowly sort of whittle down, you know, dropping unique items, pulling out what we need, sending only the unique items to our unique array, just so we could kind of get to where we could map over and just show each unique game. Maybe next week we can go through and show how we can get to where we look at the streaming data so that it looks like this, where we can show the number of people streaming for each game. And then there's some additional stuff that we can do too. But yeah, do you guys have any questions for me? I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording really quick. But yeah, do you guys have any like questions about this, or is anything like confusing or weird?